This is Reza Aslan for Aslan Media. It is Friday, July 23rd. I had a bit of a strange experience last week. As some of you know, I published a piece on the front page of the WashingtonPost.com website in which I took to task the so-called New Atheist movement, the movement popularized by people like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, and Christopher Hitchens. Now, those of you who follow my work know that I don't shy away from controversial subjects. I've written some things that have really pissed people off. But never in my entire career have I gotten the kinds of emails that I got in response to this piece against the New Atheists. I got comments that were threatening, that were violent from atheists around the world, particularly here in the United States. I was called names that I just blush to even think about. And this anger started to sort of puzzle me a little bit. Where did it all come from? Now, let me just say that the article itself was nothing new. A lot of things that I've said before, that I've written before, that other people have written before. Essentially, what I was doing was taking to task the New Atheist notion that people who believe in religion, people who believe that there is something beyond the material realm other than what we can experience with our empirical senses, that those people are not just wrong, but they're stupid. In fact, this is the kind of comments that you hear a lot from people like Chris Hitchens and Sam Harris. Comments that they've said to me, actually, quite personally. Now, some of the responses I got asked some fairly good questions. Questions that I did address in the piece, but nevertheless asked some good questions. People said, yes, but religion is responsible for great violence. But we all know, of course, that religion has no monopoly on violence. Indeed, we know that the most heinous acts, the most bestial acts of violence in human history have not only occurred in the last 100 years, but have occurred in the name of unabashedly secularist ideologies. Stalinism, Maoism, Nazism, communism even, Marxism. And my argument is that if you want to blame religion for acts of violence carried out in religion's name, that's fine, as long as you're willing to blame, say, nationalism for fascism, as long as you're willing to blame socialism for Marxism. Now, this is not the issue here that I'm most interested in. One of the arguments that I made, and the argument that I think that New Atheists had the biggest problem with, is an argument that has been made by people much smarter than me. And that is that the New Atheists come across kind of like fundamentalists. In fact, I call them evangelical atheists. And I say this for a number of reasons. The parallels with religious fundamentalism are obvious. The New Atheists, after all, have this conviction that they are in the sole possession of truth. Of course, they refer to it as scientific truth. They have a troubling lack of tolerance for the views of other people, people who disagree with them, particularly people of faith. They actually have an insistence on reading Scripture literally, in a way that actually the most literalist fundamentalist doesn't bother reading. They believe, as Sam Harris himself has said, if you don't believe every single word in the Bible or in the Quran is absolutely true and has to be incumbent upon all believers, then you're not really a Jew, you're not really a Christian, you're not really a Muslim. And I have to remind him that that sounds strikingly like what, say, Osama bin Laden believes. But most of all, I said that the thing that reminds me most of evangelicals when it comes to the New Atheist movement is the overwhelming sense of siege that they seem to have. The notion that the whole world is against them and that they have to fight to get their voices heard. This despite the millions upon millions of books that they have managed to sell in the last few years. And this brings me to my point in today's vlog, which is this. The response that I received from these New Atheists, the vitriol, the anger, the bloodthirst, the downright threats that I received for this article, reminded me a lot of the kinds of things I receive from fundamentalists of other religions when I write against something in Christianity or when I write against something in Islam. And so in many ways, this response was proof that the New Atheists are becoming somewhat evangelical and fundamentalist. Now, their argument seems to be boiled down to this. It is simply impossible for an atheist to be a fundamentalist, because fundamentalism is by definition a religious phenomenon. Well, That's my question to you this week. Is it possible for an atheist to be a fundamentalist? Is evangelical atheism a real thing, or am I just making this whole thing up? That's my question for you. I invite you, as I do every week, to respond to me either by writing something in the response section, or if you'd like, to make your own video to tell me about your views, not just about religion and atheism, but about this topic in general. And we'll post those things on the YouTube site, and we'll all start a discussion. For Aslan Media, this is Reza Aslan.